Welcome, Jeremy Lihte.
Thank you, Claire. It's good to be back in your presence.
Uh, and as I just said before we started, I should have taken you to the Dark Horse because we've had a few meetings at the Dark Horse in the days you lived in Michigan.
We have. I heard there's been a couple of changes over there, but I don't know if it's warm enough for the beer garden right now.
Oh no, it is. They've had people outside, bunch of heaters. They are making their way.
No,
Even
I
in
guess I
Michigan,
forgot. I forgot what it's like to be a Michigander. You can handle
uh-huh,
those things.
right? You put your mucklucks on, get your hoodie, and everybody will be just fine.
Beautiful.
Which is why you moved to New Mexico, I'm sure.
I moved to New Mexico. I think you know this very well because Emily, my wonderful wife, gave me no option but to move to New Mexico.
Right. But, for folks who don't know you, Jeremy, you moved to New Mexico and you ended up in a job that really, I think, takes the best of you and brings that to the world. And of course, you did good work around addiction counseling and multimedia work for the addictive counseling center that you worked for. But now down in New Mexico, tell everybody what you did and, as you call it, and the side effects of doing what you do.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a complete accident. I had worked in the addiction world for almost a decade before moving to New Mexico, and I moved to New Mexico with every intention of having nothing to do with it ever again. That didn't work out as planned. I kind of moved down here and I got involved with a very small treatment center in beautiful Santa Fe that was just outpatient counseling for addiction. And they're still around, they've expanded, they do great work. Uh, but I quickly learned that things are very different in New Mexico. This is a very rural state. This is such an incredibly multicultural state. You have, oh, I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't. You have 20 plus different pueblos. You have all of these tiny rural communities. You only have maybe three what you would consider cities, and you have all of these people just living in the desert. It's really cool, and there's so many different cultures. But what I realized moving down here was we did not have resources for behavioral health. We had very limited resources. In 2012, they mostly got kind of wiped out, just for political stuff happened. The little resources that we had left, nobody was really talking to each other. So I ended up working for a couple different facilities. Now I officially only work for one. I do some contracting work with other facilities, but the consequences or side effects of my leaping into this, understanding that there was this problem of no real connection between treatment centers, the side effect of me jumping in and wanting to fix that essentially means at this point that I work for all of the treatment centers instead of the one that pays me. And I haven't figured out how to rectify the whole, pay situation, but I'll take what I can get, and it does work out for my treatment center that I get to promote, which is Visits House Renewal Center, which is we aren't. So it's not strictly a faith-based program. It is not a a Christ approach to it. The owners are devout Christians, and I love them. They're amazing human beings. It's small, family owned, which is what I believe in when treating anything. Because once you get into the big corporations, and I can go on rants about that for hours, you lose any sincerity when it comes to treating the person and the soul. But this program started up 27 years ago with just the owner saying, I want to bring 18 people to Christ at a time without them knowing it. And I like that. I like the programs that say we want to save people. We want to bring people to Christ, but we're not going to tell them we're doing it. We're just going to get them clean. We're going to get them into the right headspace. We're going to get them feeling good again, feeling worthy again. And at some point, hopefully after they leave us, they can find that relationship. So
Wow. Wow. Well, and you know what I love about that? Rachel Held Evans used to call that sneaky Jesus.
yeah,
And and if Christ is who we believe Christ is, then Christ can take care of all that, without us forcing. In fact, if we can just be the hands and feet of Jesus and help people get clean, help them recover their lives, then God can be God on God's own terms and show up in ways that people discover God that are true, rather than proselytizing and putting someone in a position where it's like, if you come to Christ, if you want to get clean, you're going to have to go to these 6 Bible studies once you're done and all of that. But what I love that you've done, Jeremy, and you call it the side effects, which is great language for a 5 who is very clinical, methodical, and really thinks through these realities. So as an Enneagram 5 who has devoted yourself to this one space, but then turns into, so for instance, Friday, you led a conference for how many clinicians?
we had about 450 register. The ones that actually showed up and attended for this was a 5-hour event. We had about 250 clinicians from all over the country.
Right, during COVID on Zoom.
During COVID on well, technically GoToWebinar, but yeah, like the Zoom knockoff. Yeah.
The Zoom knockoff, right? And what I love, Jeremy, is not only are you willing to do both the good work that you get paid for, and then the avocation that you believe in so strongly. That comes from a really deep place in you as someone who was formerly chemically dependent, or as I said to you, one of the terms I love is a survivor of chemical dependency. And how many years have you been clean, Jeremy?
So let's put this together. I think 2011 was the last time I used a narcotic. Yeah, I think 2011. It's 2020, so 9 years. Okay. What's great is I started in this industry very early on into the whole recovery thing. And I think even my first year, I would be talking to people on the phone that were inquiring about getting help, or I would be talking on the phone with a mother that was looking to help their son, and they were looking for my wisdom. And I didn't want to tell them like, hey, it hasn't really been that long. So this is the first year I've ever not been lying to people when I say I've been clean for 9 years. So I'm not lying anymore.
Oh, it's beautiful. And Jeremy, of course, you studied the Enneagram with us when you were here, living in Michigan. And I'll never forget when you moved to New Mexico and you're like, I'm taking your book to Father Rohr because he lives right around the corner, and you were going to centering prayer with Father Rohr in the morning. And one of the things that I wanted to say about Father Rohr and the connection there is that one of the things I love that he says is everyone is addicted, and what we're addicted to is ourselves. And if you're watching this on the blog, you'll get to see this screen. If you're not, I'm so sorry. You'll have to go visit the blog, scottandclareloughrige.org. If you're listening on the podcast, we know you don't have vision there, but we have up the slide that talks about the 9 Enneagram styles. And while each style also has 3 subtypes, which breaks us into like 27 very unique personality styles. And then given your nature, your nurture, and your free will, you also have a lot of other stuff going on. But to boil it down very simply, and we think to essence, those 9 styles ranging in the powerful person, the peaceful person, the good person, the loving person, the effective person, the creative person, the wise person, the loyal person, the joyful person. Those are all ways to name essence, right? So while you may have many of those virtues, there's one of them that you take to an art form. And then if you've gotten addicted to it, you would then take that goodness to its own too much, as Father Rohr would say, and it becomes an addiction. So, those that are, the good people, they become addicted to that goodness and it becomes anger. And the loving people get addicted to loving and it becomes pride. And the effective people get addicted to being effective and it becomes deceit toward the self. And the creative people get addicted to that and it moves into envy. And the wise people get addicted to that wisdom and that becomes avarice or greed. And then the loyal people become addicted to that loyalty and they move into a fear space and they get addicted to fear. And then the joyful people, taken to its own too much, become gluttonous, and the powerful people, did I start there? Oh yeah, they get addicted to, lust for life, and they get addicted to lust. And then the 9s want peace at any price, and they get addicted to peace. It becomes sloth. And so addiction, we're all addicted. Now, would you say, Jeremy, in all of the addicts, survivors of addiction, the formerly dependent on substance people, could you see those 9 uh, vices in the folks you work with?
I mean, you and a whole lot of the people I work with, you see all 9 in one person all at the same time.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, as you lean into addiction, as you or tumble down into addiction, you the first thing that happens is your comfort zone just shrinks. Um, is your ability to handle any problems in life shrinks, because you found one really awesome solution. You found the solution that just works better and more efficiently than anything else. So and that can be alcohol. And alcohol fixes things while you're drinking it. You just feel a bit better about everything crumbling around you. Um, and or heroin, which is what I struggled with when I was very young. You know, whether I was dealing with, the loss of a family member, or I just felt that uncomfortable sensation of boredom, that was the solution. So once you're dealing with that, and once you're kind of entering into recovery and you no longer have, that one solution, you have to turn to the emotions that you have not dealt with in who knows how long. And of course, in addiction, you see gluttony. I think that's the most obvious one. Of course, you see it in slothness. You're not working to truly, be a contributing member of society. You see the anger that just lashes out anytime you can't get what you need. You see envy in what other people have. Lust is an obvious one. So you see all of those in addiction, but it almost pops out more once you enter into recovery, because now, part of these attributes are coping mechanisms. Entering recovery, there's such an imbalance in your emotions, in your problem solving. So we are very much, and because we're so used to these emotions, that's where we're at. We're outside of our Enneagram points, and what recovery is moving into the peace, goodness, love, effectiveness, creativity, wisdom, and that's what recovery truly is. It's just figuring out how to get there. And, I really view so much of the outer uh, points of the Enneagram as just kind of a reactiveness.
Mhm.
And if people in addiction or people in recovery or anything, it's reactiveness. And it's just trying to bring them back into that center, if that makes did that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely makes sense. And so, what we would say is when we're centered, where these virtues are, we reflect God. And
Right.
when we're out on our edge, we play God,
Right.
right? Like we're trying to get what we want in the way that we've coped. So pride may have worked at one time. Deceit you might have thought it worked, right? You may have thought envy worked for you. You may have thought greed was working to get what you want. You may have thought fear was working to protect yourself, or gluttony to satisfy yourself, or lust to imbibe, or sloth to disappear, or anger to come out fighting, or all of those things. And yet there is this reality of who you truly are. And I think you might remember this from the training. We talk about if you were if you had amnesia, if you lost your ability to remember, would you still be you? And the soul of us is what is most true about us. The reflection of God is what is most true about us. When we start to live in that personality style, that type, and trying to get what we want and getting addicted to our own way of being in the world, or using substances because we can no longer handle the way we are in the world, we lose connection to soul, but you're still there.
Right.
What's most true is still there. And so, in the work of recovery, I love what you're saying, bringing us back to center, helping people learn to center themselves and to discover what is most true about them. And so that leads us to this word that we're looking at today, Jeremy. The word is kind. And you're a 5, and so smart, informed, an observer of life. People see that part of you, but as a 5, your heart space is the 2, this loving person. And I've connected you to people that I really cared about, that had those that were addicted, and I saw your kindness. Or even as the scripture says, it is the loving kindness of God that leads us to repentance, or leads us back home to what is most true about us. And I just wondered, how did God show up for you as kind in the midst of your addiction? How did you find the kindness of God for you, Jeremy?
Well, to be fair, so I kindness for you to choose me this week for this subject, because I think that another maybe outer part of the 5 kind of manifests some grumpiness. So I was a little bit surprised that I was the one to speak on this subject. I showed Emily your message, and I said, "How the heck do I talk about this? I've given talks on so many on plenty of things surrounding addiction, but kindness has never been a subject that I've spoken on." And she said, "Just wing it like always. We just watched the Mr. Rogers movie. Just try to tap into that." Um,
And I'm going to push back a little bit, because your true essence, the kindness of God, is seen in you. And I've seen you give it to other people. So I know that God in Christ had to be present to you in some kind of way that allowed me to see that in you.
yeah, and you're not wrong. I so yeah, I'm generally grumpy outwards. It's just, I think it's more of just my sense of humor or
It
approach to life.
is.
Um, but as far as kindness, so when we're talking about my story, it's kindness wasn't really a thing that I was capable of recognizing. When I also do interventions, and I've done interventions for many years. So when you're doing an intervention, you're doing something extremely kind for that individual. Every person that's in addiction faces an intervention at some point in their life, every single one. That can be, a formal intervention, kind of what I do, which is I go in with the family and I sit down and we confront the individual and try to convince them to change their ways, or at least accept, the option of going into treatment. And then you have people that have a terrible car accident, that get a DUI, that have a major loss, and you have, the ultimate intervention, which is overdose or death. So every person has an intervention of some type. The intervention that I help facilitate with the families that are willing to do it, and very few families are willing to take that step and do an intervention. It's actually an interesting statistic from a talk that I really love. And this holds true. 9 out of 10 interventions are successful. 9 out of 10 times when you go into somebody's home and you have that sit down with the family, the person at some point says, yes, I will accept treatment. Probably only 1 out of 10 families that I talk to, or that most interventionists talk to, 1 in 10 families say yes, they'll do the intervention. That's always the hang up, because it's that idea of what is kind and what isn't.
Mhm.
So when you go in and you confront this person and you try to get them to go to treatment, even if they say yes, but they're still kicking and screaming and they're going in begrudgingly, you are doing them a great kindness.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, families, and I think this is a decent example of how we confuse that kindness, is uh, the reason why families hardly ever say yes, we'll go through with an intervention, is because they don't understand that is a kindness, and the client doesn't understand that is a kindness. Because the way we should react to kindness is with kindness. That's the obvious thing, or is with some sort of joy or happiness that we have been bestowed, that this kindness has been bestowed upon us. But none of that happens in an intervention usually. The family's crying and upset. The client is crying and upset. The family usually never wants to actually go through with the intervention because they're scared that their son or daughter or loved one is going to be mad at them. When what we're trying to do is save that individual's life. And if they're going to be mad at you for a bit, you still did them a kindness. You still did them the ultimate kindness of giving them, a shot at renewal and a new life. So, go back to that as an example from my story, I never viewed any type of intervention or recovery effort or treatment center or anybody confronting me on this to be a kindness. I did not view every opportunity that God gave me to become a survivor of chemical dependency a kindness. Um, After it was years into recovery, into being clean from drugs and from drugs and alcohol, that I finally started to feel that kindness from God. My story is I grew up in church my whole life, and then I went off and did all this crazy stuff. My wife was raised to be like a militant atheist, and she ended up like not having any of the issues that I did growing up. And my wife, that was destined to never enter a church in her life, walked into Crossroads just one morning while I was still asleep, and then came back and she tells me about it and says, by the way, I read all of the Bible, and this is the thing we're going to start doing now. We're going to go see Scott and Claire every Sunday. And this was probably 3 years after I stopped using drugs. And I should have been, centered. I should have been feeling good. I should have been, the exemplary person in recovery that just everything's awesome now. I don't need drugs to feel good, all of this stuff. Um, but I wasn't, uh, because something, and I say this all the time to people that I work with, uh, drugs, alcohol, smoking, whatever, they're they're a piece of cake to recover from when compared to the recovery from something like shame.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's not just people in addiction that experience and build up just backpacks and trailers of shame. It's any person. So kindness did not come to me until I was able to truly find the understanding of grace. I always think back to being raised in the church, and I was raised in this Southern Baptist church where, I so many of the sermons I just heard over and over and over, people trying to, explain to everybody in the congregation, exists. This is what grace is, or I'm in Bible study, I'm being told, like, why in Bible study is this teacher constantly telling me what grace is? I get it. God forgives me. And now looking back, and once I like figured that out as an adult, I was like, why didn't I need this so much as a child? It's because I didn't do anything. Like, I was fine. I didn't really need grace that badly. Like, I didn't, sure, I hit my kid brother in the face with a tent pole that one time. I felt bad about it, but I understand how forgiveness works. Once you have these trailer trucks full of shame, getting into adulthood and after addiction and everything else, it's much harder to really find that true understanding of grace. And once you have that, then you can understand kindness. And that was a major moment for me, and that happened in Crossroads.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that Scott and I realize from our perspective about grace is that there is a redemptive virtue of back to health for each of the Enneagram styles. So when we get addicted to all of the things that we have named around the circle here, we'll actually post this on the blog today, the redemptive virtues back to health. When we've gotten addicted to lust and sloth and anger and pride and deceit and envy and greed and fear and gluttony, and lust, when we realize we need the loving kindness of God to lead us back to health, to lead us back to center, um, of the virtues, the reflection truly of God, and that it isn't by hook or by crook. It's not by shame or by guilt or by pounding somebody over the head with scriptures, but it is about this invitation to see yourself as beloved. That when you are in God's presence, even the ways we have gotten addicted do not remove the belovedness of God. Do not remove. I remember when I came, actually, I think it was like 3 years before my dad died. And I said to him, he told me I was an angel. He said, Claire, you're an angel. I said, oh, Dad, you forget everything I did as a kid. And he said, Claire, those were only exercises. Now, my dad, was raised by the Ignatians, and St. Ignatius Loyola would say that there are exercises that we go through, consolations and desolations that help lead us to understand the love of Christ. And I think it is the loving kind. When my dad said that, oh, Claire, those were only exercises. That was the kindness of my dad reminding me of who I am, you know, reminding me of how how he was able to see my soul in the midst of all my antics as as a teenager. And I know you were up to stuff, but might be able to go toe to toe with you on some of our
Mhm.
stories.
Yeah,
I could have used a treatment center myself. And But I love that the idea of intervention is a kindness. And you went. I can remember a couple of stories of you going in interventions with people that we cared about at Crossroads, and bringing the kindness of Christ. And that even those people who were family members of the one, they fell in love with you. And in fact, I said to one of them the other day, guess who I just talked to today? And she was like, oh, we have such great memories of him. And I want to say to all of us, during this time when we know that addictions are on the rise,
yeah,
when we know that people are, their coping strategies are not working,
yeah,
that and maybe even some of them are starting to realize that these coping strategies are not working, or getting stuck on these particular things and becoming pharisaical or religious or shamed or guilted or however or afraid. We want to say that this might be a time for you, um, to ask for help, to seek out help yourself. It may be a time for you as a loved one of someone who you know is addicted, that you say, it's time to do an intervention. If it's substance abuse, the kind of alcohol or narcotics, or other addictions that are robbing the person of God's loving kindness, get help. Get help from people who practice this kind of work as the gift that they bring to the world. And so we're going to put Jeremy's links below. And one of the things I love about what Jeremy is doing is he's not working in a silo and saying, here's just one way, but he's actually broadened the work that he's done to say, here are the people who've helped, and in different ways. And so they're connecting in those ways. You can always contact us at Crossroads, and we will connect you with people that we know are a part of the helping team. And I guess one of the things I want to say, to those who just thought that they were going to get Enneagram information today, do you have some parting words for us? Something you'd like us to remember today, Jeremy?
So just as you were speaking, and as we had that up, it kind of had me thinking in the times that we live in, which, yeah, as you're absolutely correct in saying that addiction is on the rise. But we can speak outside of addiction and just say our abilities to cope are just out the window. For I would imagine everybody to some degree, but some more than others. And when we're looking at being inside of our Enneagram number or outside. So for me, it's wisdom, greed, as I'm a 5, and when you say that, I kind of lean into this collective, into creating this collaboration. It's because I am a 5. It's because am, it was both in and out of uh, my 5-ness. It was me being wise enough to know that I need other wise people around me, that I cannot have all the answers myself. When someone calls looking for help, I can't always be that person. I can't always have the answers. And it was also the greedy part of me that was like, I have to have all the freaking answers. But it kind of made me think about, during these times of high stress, of isolation, in the political environment that we've been living in, it's not like my story. It's not, this long story of being in and out of addiction. It's not being in and out of abuse and trauma, that can take somebody from outside of their Enneagram back into the inner space of wisdom or love versus anger,
Mm,
or goodness versus anger. I'm sorry.
mm,
It can be like that in these times. It can be feeling like a really good person, and you're immediately angry on Facebook when you see that somebody isn't. You can be
mhm.
somebody that is reading and feels wise and is becoming the new term more woke, um, and and you see something on Facebook and you get greed that. Uh, or you get upset that somebody does not have the wisdom that you have because you just read the thing. We're living in a very difficult time where it's not a gradual exiting of your Enneagram.
Mhm.
It's a daily focus, and this is something that we need to be constantly looking at. So luckily, people like you, Claire, that can remind us weekly uh, of exactly this. And this
Mhm.
is something that I need to focus on more, because just the few minutes I've been looking at it, so much comes rolling back to me. And the final thing I'll say in regards to addiction, um, it- and addiction and kindness is, I know this is true for most of the country, but it's fairly new to New Mexico, where New Mexico created a new certification for individuals. It's called CPSWs, Certified Peer Support Workers, because the
Mm,
state of New Mexico realized, okay, we have so little help for people that are in recovery or that are struggling with mental health, and we have such a surplus of individuals that have been through addiction, that have been through what I went through, uh, and probably might not have the means or funds to be able to go off and become social workers. So they created the certification that costs $50 to become certified in. It's like a month-long training, and then you take a test. And now these individuals, many of whom had spent 20 years in prison, have felonies, so they could never become certified in anything, all of a sudden have the certification, because we had such a surplus of these people that just wanted to pass on the kindness that they received, uh,
wow.
and did not understand it was a kindness until years or months after that intervention of
Mm.
what forced them to uh, exit their addiction. So we have thousands of these CPSWs in New Mexico, and it's a program that's starting all over the country.
Oh
So
my
if you
gosh. Yeah. So we'll put that link
yeah,
here as well, because if we have certified peer
support workers,
support workers all over our neighborhoods,
yeah,
then we'll be able to get through moments like this that are, really desperately in need of the kindness of a good neighbor, the kindness of a good Samaritan that will stop. And it is one of the reasons we think that the Enneagram is such important work. Even so we do this work for professionals like yourself that we hope that can bring it into their professions. But I have to tell you, when we learn how to love and we learn how to work with one another, we learn how to be in relationship with one another based on someone's essence, then when we can see them with the kindness of Christ, we might be able to help lead them back to their true self. So, Jeremy, I appreciate you so very much, and we could do hours and hours with you, um, but so we'll bring you back, and then you'll give us everything we need to know about connection in this blog, that may help folks who have a family member or themselves that needs some help during these days. And friends, just breathe deep. Tomorrow, we're going to be interviewing a therapist, and we're going to be bringing spiritual directors, therapists, coaches, folks that can really help us pay attention to what is most true about us. And what is most true is we are made to reflect God's image. And when we start playing God, someone can call us back home and say, friend, let's remember who you are and show you loving kindness. So peace be with you. Loving kindness be with you, Jeremy. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me and sucking my wife into the church all those years ago.
You're welcome.